After the car accident left me with a disabled leg, I lost my temper all the time. So my husband bought me a robot that looked exactly like him. He brushed me off impatiently and said, "There. An emotional punching bag. Happy now?" The robot knew exactly what he was doing. At first, when my depression relapsed and I refused to eat, he would kneel beside me, kissing me and coaxing me. "Good girl, baby. Take one more bite." Later, when we rested together, he said the same thing. It was another fight. Julian Vale dragged his suitcase downstairs while I struggled to turn my wheelchair behind him, flinging a stack of plane tickets hard at his back. Who is in London? Who is so important that you have to run there all year long? Across the staircase between us, the tickets scattered like snow. Julian stopped, looked up coldly, and curled his lips into a sneer. "At least London doesn't have you." Then the door slammed shut. I sat there in a daze. A pair of hands suddenly reached over my shoulders, and the faint scent of pine surrounded me. He gently wiped the tears from my cheeks, then crouched down and looked up at me. Looking at the face in front of me, a face identical to Julian's when he was 20, I felt a surge of anger. I instinctively wanted to slap him, but when my hand lifted, I forced it to stop midair. 1991 was only a robot. He was the emotional punching bag and scapegoat Julian had bought for me because he could no longer stand me. What did the way Julian had failed me have to do with him? If robots had feelings, he would probably be sick of me too. I lowered my hand weakly. To my shock, the next second, a light slap landed on 1991's pale cheek. Ignoring my shocked stare, 1991 tilted his head, leaving a faint red mark at the corner of his mouth, then raised his hand as if he was going to slap himself again. Terrified, I grabbed his wrist. "Are you crazy?" 1991's beautiful eyes curved as he pressed his burning cheek into my palm and rubbed against it gently. "You care about me." I had no idea which circuit had shorted out for him to reach that conclusion. 1991 leaned in and kissed me, coaxing me in a cloyingly sweet murmur. "Baby, if you care about me, listen to me and take good care of yourself tonight. Eat your dinner, okay?" I was so stunned that I forgot to say no. 1991 had been strange from the moment he arrived. He wore Julian's face from when Julian was 20 and acted as humbly toward me as Julian once had. If I had not known for certain that he was a robot, I would have suspected that 20-year-old Julian had somehow been dropped into the present. But sometimes, 1991 showed a different kind of forcefulness. Like now. I clutched the front of my clothes with all my strength, furious and humiliated as I ordered 1991 to get out of the bathroom. "How many times do I have to tell you? I don't need help. I can bathe myself. And fall out of the tub like last time? Hurt yourself and bleed?" 1991 stared at me with eyes so dark they looked almost machine cold. I refused to back down. I glared back at him and said each word clearly. "That is none of your business. This is an order. Get out." 1991 lowered his eyes. Then he suddenly bent down, slid an arm beneath my knees, carried me into the tub, pulled off his tie, and gently held my restless hand steady. When instinct made me try to sit up, 1991 leaned in sharply. His long, straight lashes cast shadows like dark wings. I froze as he told me, slow and unhurried, "My little owner, most of the time, you can give me orders. Unfortunately, this is one of the exceptions." In the end, 1991 bathed me, wrapped me in a towel, and carried me out while I was still damp. My face was red all the way down to my neck. It was purely from anger. I had told Julian several times before about situations like this and asked him to send 1991 away. But Julian never listened. He only looked down at his phone, chatting with God knows who, and brushed me off. Everything the robot does is within its safety protocols. It's for your own good. After I brought it up enough times, Julian took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and leaned back in his chair. He looked at me with a faint, mocking smile, his tone mild. "What? 1991 being my stand-in isn't enough? You won't be satisfied unless I go back to being your dog like I used to be?" For once, I fell silent. After that, I never complained again. So 1991 grew bolder by the day, until he often stayed beside me to keep me company. At dawn the next morning, I rolled over and found myself pressed against a warm chest. The arm around my waist tightened at once, pulling me fully into his embrace, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. My eyes flew open. I stared at 1991's sleeping face in shock and murmured, "Don't push it." 1991 woke at the sound of my voice. His eyes were perfectly clear, and with an innocent smile, he took advantage of my lowered guard to lean in and kiss my forehead. Then he got up and helped me get dressed. I had been dressed and handled like a doll so many times that I had gone numb to it. 1991 reminded me, "You're going back to the Young estate today." My face stiffened, and I frowned in instinctive resistance. After the car accident, one bad thing after another kept happening around me. First, my adoptive parents found their biological daughter and stopped caring about me. Then their biological daughter came back, and she turned out to be Julian's ex-girlfriend, Cherry Young. If Cherry had never gone missing back then, she and Julian would have been the ones who grew up together as childhood sweethearts. They would have married smoothly and naturally. Unlike me, I was mean-tempered and impossible, always driving everyone away. Technically, Julian was family to her by marriage. He was family. So my anger and resentment could only be dismissed as unreasonable. Only 1991 disagreed. He said depression was not some minor issue, and to make me take it seriously, he even produced a 20-page paper on the subject. My vision nearly went dark the moment I saw the German at the beginning. After that, 1991 coaxed and tricked me into seeing a therapist several times, though the results were only so-so. My appetite was still poor. I still cried for no reason, and after every outburst, I would sink into self-loathing. Other than 1991, no one wanted to be around me. Today was Cherry's birthday. Julian had personally flown to London to bring her back, and the Young family was throwing a special party to welcome their little princess home. Mrs. Young Sr. even ordered me to attend. What did I teach you growing up? A woman should have both grit and grace, not cower and cry over losing the use of one leg the way you do. Cherry suffered so much, yet when has she ever complained? When we arrived at the Young estate, 1991 could not show himself, so a butler came out to escort me inside. I stared at the brightly lit mansion. It was clearly the home where I had lived for more than 20 years, yet I felt afraid to go in. Instinctively, I turned back to look at 1991. He sat in the car, his gaze gentle, and tapped his wrist. I was wearing the electronic bracelet he had made for me. As long as it detected an emotional fluctuation, he would receive my location and find me. He said, "Trust your fairy godmother's magic, my little Cinderella." I had no idea when I had started listening to 1991 so obediently. It was as long as he was there, I had a nest where I could hide and be protected. Was that a good thing? Julian thought it was normal anyway. He believed I had merely transferred my dependence on him to a robot with his exact face. In short, perhaps the person I could not live without was still Julian. When Julian realized that, his expression turned unreadable, but he did not seem pleased. We had only fought a few days ago, and now he stood beside me, constantly adjusting his tie, as if every second he spent with me made it hard for him to breathe. Fortunately, Mrs. Young Sr. called him over and asked him to lead Cherry in the opening dance. The meaningful stares around me never stopped. I knew what they were thinking. They were laughing at me, at how untouchable I had once been, and how I was now disabled, sitting in a wheelchair, watching my husband dance intimately with his ex-girlfriend without saying a word. I turned my wheelchair and tried to ignore those prying looks as I headed toward the terrace. I did not expect someone to follow me. The reek of alcohol hit me as he leaned close to my ear and sighed. Poor little heiress. The once outstanding lady ended up in such a tough situation, and Julian doesn't even care about you anymore. Why not stay with me instead? I can give you sincere company and care. I scoffed and raised my hand to slap him without another word. Back in school, I could not stand how Landon Ward used his family's power to bully the weak, so I had slapped him in front of the entire school. Landon reacted fast. He grabbed my wrist, his grip trapping my electronic bracelet, and smiled viciously. Addicted to hitting people now, are you? Do you still think you're that proud and outstanding young heiress from back then? Julian used to grovel at your feet. What about now? His inappropriate eyes swept over me slowly from head to toe. Now the only thing you have left that's worth anything is that face. The moment he finished speaking, Landon's expression twisted. A vein jumped in his forehead as his entire head was yanked backward. The terrace chandelier cast a wavering light. Beneath the shifting glow, 1991's tall figure looked sharp-edged and merciless. He held Landon firmly and pushed his head gently against the terrace edge. The impact was deafening. Faint red traces appeared on Landon's forehead. His unfocused eyes moved to 1991, filled with disbelief. Julian, are you insane? It's not that serious. 1991's answer was to slam Landon into the edge of the table again. The force was so savage that one of the table legs snapped clean off. The commotion reached the main hall. Julian and Cherry came out first, and Cherry visibly froze when she saw 1991's face. On the terrace, 30-year-old Julian and 1991, who still carried a trace of boyishness, stood facing each other. The contrast between maturity and youth was so jarring that it almost made the scene feel unreal. Julian ordered 1991 to let go. 1991 did not move. Julian's gaze sharpened, and he repeated the order. 1991 had no expression. A few faint light stains brushed across the side of his face, making him look chilling. Julian had the authority to decide what happened to him. But 1991 still looked at me, as if he were asking, "Are you satisfied?" At that moment, my heart seemed to speed up for a beat. By the time I came back to myself, I had already reached my hand toward him. So 1991 slowly let go, allowing Landon to drop to his knees in front of me with a thud. As 1991 walked over, he seemed worried the faint marks on Landon's forehead would stain my shoes, so he gently nudged him aside to keep a safe distance. Julian watched me tremble faintly and grip 1991's hand as if seeking protection. He frowned and demanded, "Mia, what is going on with you?" I did not look at him. I was afraid I would lose control of my emotions in public, and I did not even realize my tone had turned pleading as I whispered to 1991, "Let's go home." Only then did Julian begin to believe that something was wrong with my mental state. Julian dealt with Landon as quickly as possible and hurried home, only to walk in on 1991 carrying me fresh from the bath, setting me down on the bed, and kissing my forehead with practiced ease. He was so intimate that it looked as if he were my husband. The door flew open with a bang. Julian stared at what 1991 was doing and let out a disbelieving, mocking laugh. "I told you to take care of her, and you took care of her all the way into bed?" Faced with Julian's accusation, 1991 was almost perfectly courteous. "Sir, this falls within my safety protocols. Comforting my owner in place of a negligent partner is my duty." Julian's voice was ice-cold. "It seems your company's safety protocols need revision." He ordered 1991 to leave. But I clutched 1991's clothes desperately and would not let go. The fear of a fledgling about to lose its nest surged up inside me. I was so scared that I started crying. "No, don't go." Sobbing, I burrowed into 1991's arms. It was as if his body was my only shelter, and only by clinging tightly to him would I be loved. Seeing me like this, Julian's face hardened. The warmth he had once carried in his youth had long since vanished from his mature features. He strode over, reached out, and roughly yanked me out of 1991's arms. I lost control and screamed with everything I had. For one instant, Julian's expression went blank. He tried to soothe me, but he had not held me in a long time. The way his fingers touched me was stiff and unfamiliar. What I could not bear even more was that the same hands touching me had also touched Cherry, so I kept pushing him away. The lover I had once wanted to melt into had suddenly become a monster who made my skin crawl and terrified me when he came close. For once, Julian looked at a loss. He touched my right leg and said, "Mia, what's wrong with you? Does your leg hurt? Look at me. It's Julian." My numb right leg was being touched by a man who no longer loved me. It felt almost like reliving the trauma of the car accident all over again. My chest rose and fell violently, and I could barely breathe. While Julian was still stunned, 1991 yanked him away, bent down, wrapped me in the blanket, and pulled me into his arms. All the while, he kept soothing me in a soft, patient voice. That kind of patience was something even the Julian from years ago might not have been capable of. Julian could not speak for a long time. Only when I heard Julian's heavy footsteps leaving the room did the trembling in my body slowly calm down. The room fell quiet. Weakly, I asked 1991 if I had turned into a crazy woman. 1991 shook his head and said I was very cute like that. Liar. I was not cute at all. Otherwise, why did everyone I depended on eventually hurt me? My car accident had not been an accident. It had been a deliberate attempt to kill me. When I woke up and saw the killer's face on the news, for one moment, it felt as if the sky had fallen. Like a sinner stammering through confession to a priest in a confessional, I told 1991 haltingly, I used to think she was the person most likely to love me. I was adopted by Mrs. Young Sr. when I was 6. The Young family was strict with its children, and with Mr. Young Sr. and Mrs. Young Sr., every move I made had to meet their standards. Playtime and candy were luxuries. Whenever my grades failed to meet their expectations, the Youngs would look disappointed, as if silently saying that I was not their real child after all. I had always been terrified of disappointing people. So I trembled my way through every lesson and etiquette rule that made me want to throw up, just to earn a nod of approval from them. Back then, I believed that being cruel to myself in order to satisfy others was the price of being loved. Only my nanny, Agnes Green, gave me the illusion of being kept and spoiled like a cherished little pet. Sometimes, in private, she did things that made me feel deeply uncomfortable. But every time a punishment ended, she would hold me, kiss me, and feed me candy. In the softest voice imaginable, she would coax me, my little bird, my good little puppy. With her, I thought I had found a mother's love. So even when I discovered that Agnes often stole things from the house, I chose to keep it a secret. I was afraid that if she was sent away, no one would love me anymore. But I never expected that after her stealing was exposed, Agnes would immediately pin the blame on me. She told Mrs. Young Sr., Mia has problems. She lies all the time, and she likes to steal. From then on, there was another layer of suspicion in the way the Youngs looked at me. Agnes became worse and worse to me as well. The punishments she carried out behind a locked bedroom door grew more and more brazen. Because Agnes knew that from then on, even if I could no longer bear it and try to tell on her, no one would believe a bad child who lied and stole. When I reached this point, I could not stop myself from trembling. The shadow of my childhood seemed to stretch out an invisible hand, seize my disabled right leg, and drag me hard toward the abyss. But at that moment, 1991 suddenly gripped my shoulders firmly and pulled me back from my daze. He touched my forehead, slick with cold sweat, and watched me quietly with eyes as beautiful as black obsidian. In his gaze, it felt as if anything could be confessed and anything could be understood. He asked me gently, "What did that nanny do to you in that room?" For one moment, I almost said it. It was the root of my depression. It was the nightmare from my childhood that had never left me. If I told 1991, I could be saved. But I could not make a sound. It was as if that invisible hand had closed around my throat and strangled me. My throat ached with sobs, and my eyes blurred with tears. I wanted so badly for 1991 to save me. But no sound came out. 1991 did not force me to answer. His eyes were as deep as the sea, holding a boundless kind of acceptance, and inside that gaze, I was free. Then he changed the subject. Like a detective, he made it feel as light as playing a mystery game with a beloved child. The official explanation was that Agnes had an underlying psychiatric disorder. Back then, after she was caught stealing, she left the Young household. Years later, after being released from treatment, her desire for revenge spiraled out of control, and she planned the car crash that was meant to kill me. Everyone thought that explanation made sense, but 1991 said it was not that simple. He cited criminal psychology theories and case studies from several countries. His speech was fluent and elegant, but the content was so obscure that it was almost hypnotic. I barely managed to listen for a while before my eyelids grew too heavy, and I drifted off in a daze. The next day, when I asked 1991 what conclusion he had reached, he only smiled slyly and turned his cheek toward me, as if asking for a bribe. "Kiss me, and I'll tell you." After our talk the night before, 1991, and I had grown closer. He was no longer just a strange robot. He had become a companion I was willing to trust, my protector. So my expression came alive again, and I rolled my eyes at him. In any case, after the hidden run, Agnes had died suddenly of a heart attack. Digging into the motives of a mentally unstable woman did not seem that important anymore. I began desperately wanting to get better. I no longer wanted to be trapped by depression and the past, so I took the initiative and asked to see a therapist. But 1991 seemed very dissatisfied with the previous sessions. In an arrogant tone, he declared, "Therapists are useless." His voice carried to the door, where Julian had just arrived with a whole group of therapists and fallen speechless. How should I describe Julian's expression these past few days? It looked as if he had shot himself in the foot, and he was furious about it. Just as I once had, he hinted several times that I should stay away from 1991. "Don't you think this robot is acting strange?" I said, "No. I think he's adorable." Julian choked. His face darkened, and he said sarcastically, "I touch you once and you lose your mind, but that thing wears my face and harasses you, and you're not disgusted?" That was true. I reflected on it for a moment, then looked seriously at Julian's face. Time had been kind to him. He was extraordinarily handsome, and the success he had gained in his career gave him even more charm than he had at 20. Even though he had never taken off the wedding ring on his finger, women still threw themselves at him like moths to a flame. By society standards, he was the perfect husband who refused to abandon his disabled wife. The more pathetic I became, the brighter his halo shone. Only then did I understand that he had been moving forward all along. Not once had he turned back to pull me out of the mud. It had been a long time since the two of us had looked at each other like this. Something shifted in Julian's eyes, as if he had suddenly remembered that he had once loved me too. In his youth, he had poured every fierce, reckless feeling he had into me. He had never even given that much to Cherry, his first love. But love can wear thin. It is like eating a sweet plum down to the pit. If you do not plant that pit back into the soil and care for it, it will shrivel, mold, and eventually become something unrecognizable and disgusting. Julian did not understand that. Under my gaze, a crack appeared in his cold mask. He crouched down and leaned closer, as if he wanted to grant me one merciful, pitying kiss. After all, in his eyes, I had lost my husband's love, relapsed into depression, and become attached to a robot. I must have looked truly pitiful. He leaned in and said softly, "Mia, as long as you behave, I won't abandon you." The aggressive scent of his cologne made me nauseous. So I slapped him across the face the moment he came close. Ever since I had ended up in a wheelchair, I had not had a chance to hit him like that. Looking at Julian's stunned, reddening face, years of suffocation suddenly dissolved. I pressed my lips together, trying to hold back my smile. "Thank you for your mercy, but let me correct one thing. You are not abandoning me. I am abandoning you." The divorce papers had been handed to his secretary 2 days ago. How blind did he have to be not to see them? Julian refused to believe that I would ask for a divorce. He said I was sick, and that what I needed was treatment, not divorce. He came up with all kinds of psychological explanations, but not once did he consider the possibility that I no longer loved him. He even thought 1991 was behind it, claiming that 1991 was somehow mind-controlling me. I grew tired of his endless questioning, so I sat in my wheelchair, turned my head toward the window, and waited for 1991 to bring me a limited batch raspberry cake from the other side of town. Julian had just come home from the office. Irritated, he took off his suit jacket and tossed it down along with the unsigned divorce papers. There had clearly been no love left between us for a long time, yet now he acted as if he suddenly could not stand my indifference. He would rather I lash out at him in jealous fits than sit there distant and silent like this. If I did not love him, then how could I depend on a robot who looked exactly like him? The whole thing was absurd. I found it laughable too, so I turned and asked him, "Weren't you the one who had 1991 customized to look like you? Isn't that absurd too?" The anger on Julian's face seemed to freeze, as if someone had hit pause. He denied it in disbelief. "It wasn't me." Julian said that when he bought 1991, he had instructed the robotics company to send me appearance templates, so I could adjust the robot's features however I wanted. But I had never received anything. If no one had made 1991 look like Julian, then where had 1991 come from? The bracelet around my wrist flickered with a faint blue light, and the atmosphere in the room suddenly sank into an eerie stillness. Julian sensed that something was wrong. He quickly took out his phone and called the robotics company. After hearing the situation, the person on the other end sounded just as shocked. The manager, speaking with a thick Manchester accent, explained that their custom robots took at least 2 years to produce, and the overseas shipping and paperwork were even more complicated. Julian's order was not even in production yet. More importantly, they could not find any robot with the serial number 1991. Julian was about to lose his mind. After all his years dominating the business world, no one had ever played him this badly. He became even more convinced that 1991 had some hidden agenda with me, so he ordered people to watch the house closely. The moment 1991 came back, they were to seize him. "I'd like to see what kind of freak went to all this trouble just to get close to you," he said through gritted teeth. Because the whole thing was humiliating, Julian kept it from outsiders. Everyone else only thought a burglar had broken into the house. The young family did not take it seriously. As usual, they called Julian over and asked him to help arrange a job for Cherry. When Julian got the call, he did not leave immediately the way he used to. Instead, he hesitated and glanced at me, then reminded me uneasily, "If anything happens, press the panic button right away. There are bodyguards downstairs." I nodded perfunctorily, my eyes fixed on the window. Dark rain clouds drifted across the sky, and the damp smell of soil hung in the air. It was going to rain. The road back into the city would definitely be jammed. Julian did not hear a clear answer from me, so he frowned and repeated, "Did you hear me?" With my back to him, I dragged out my voice impatiently. "I heard you. Why are you still here? Careful, or your little cherry blossom princess will start crying." I did not know if Julian had some kind of masochistic streak, but after being mocked so sarcastically by me, he actually smiled. For a moment, he seemed to turn back into the 20-year-old Julian, gently coaxing a jealous young girlfriend. "Be good and listen. You wanted raspberry cake, right? I'll bring you some when I come back." As if he even knew where that bakery was. He was such a damn scumbag. I made a face at the window. A little while later, when I thought of 1991, my expression fell again. 1991 was a bastard too, a liar, an awful thing. Rain pattered softly against the flower pots by the balcony. I covered my face and tried hard to hold back the sting of tears. It was fine. It was not the first time I had been deceived. All the words about loving me were lies. Hadn't I known that all along? So, why did it still hurt? Why did I always have to be so stupid believing again and again that I could be loved? Just as I had cursed 1991 to hell and back in my head and was swearing off love for good, a long, well-defined hand suddenly appeared over the edge of the balcony. A tall, dark shadow vaulted inside, soaked from head to toe. My eyes widened as I watched 1991 calmly open the balcony door from the outside. His black hair hung wet over his lowered eyes, his thin lips were a vivid red, and in his hand was an exquisitely packaged box of raspberry cake. Every step he took left a footprint on the floor. 1991 walked right up to me like that. Looking down from above, he pinched the tip of my nose between his index finger and thumb, and repeated in a cool voice, "You bastard. You liar. You awful thing." I looked at the bracelet on my wrist and immediately realized what had happened. "You were listening in on me?" "Yes, baby." 1991 laughed without the slightest shame, tilting his head as a drop of rain slid from his damp hair. Are you going to arrest me? The panic button was right beside my hand. As long as I pressed it, the burly bodyguards downstairs would rush up and capture 1991. 1991 would be taken away. Would he be sent to prison? Or would he be shipped back across the ocean to the robotics factory? Would he be destroyed? Or would they rebuild him into something else? He did not look afraid at all, as if he believed I would definitely soften toward him. He was being way too correct. I glared at him angrily. After a long while, I lost all my momentum, pouted, and lowered my eyes to the rain soaking his pant legs. The bakery on the other side of town was far away. A round trip took half the day, and the raspberry cake was always the hardest item to get. Julian had once sent people to stand in line for it, but even that had made him impatient. After we got married, he never went there again. He would give me more expensive and more elaborate cakes, but he would never waste another second on me. After 1991 arrived, he somehow learned that I liked that cake. So for the entire long summer, throughout raspberry season, 1991 always managed to buy me the freshest batch right on time. The rain was heavy today, and 1991 looked soaked and disheveled. Yet the cake in his hand was not damaged at all. After a stretch of silence, I shoved him hard, my eyes stinging. Go. Just go. I'll pretend I never saw you. 1991 did not move. He studied me calmly. Why are you crying? I shook my head and only repeated the order for him to leave. But 1991 asked again, if you want me to go, why are you crying? The rain grew heavier, blowing onto the balcony and striking the glass with sharp, scattered taps. My mood was as gloomy as the weather. I opened my mouth and was just about to speak when I suddenly heard the sharp sound of a car engine shutting off downstairs. Julian must have come back early. I pointed at the closet and told 1991 to hide quickly. He gave me a faint, unreadable look, then slowly took off his shoes. While he was at it, he even wiped the footprints off the floor. Then he obediently squeezed into the closet and asked with serious curiosity, "Is this what people in TV shows call an affair?" For a moment, I had no words. To be honest, sometimes I really wanted to pry open his head and see what kind of wiring he had in there. Soon, footsteps came upstairs, and the person outside knocked politely. "Mia, it's me." The door opened, but the person who came in was Cherry. Cherry walked into the room, elegant and composed now, nothing like the insecure, frumpy girl she had been back in school. Back then, I had not known she had history with Julian. When I saw Landon and those spoiled rich boys bullying and harassing her, I even helped her a few times. But she seemed to have forgotten that. After she was accepted back into the young family, she treated me like a stranger too. So the two of us could hardly be called friendly. "Do you need something?" I asked in confusion. "Julian isn't here." Cherry looked around the room and smiled. "I already saw him. He told me about the robot you keep by your side, and I was a little worried, so I came to check on you." Julian really had no fear of embarrassing himself in front of her. He told her everything. After a few sparse pleasantries, I thought of 1991 still hidden in the closet and was ready to show her the door. Suddenly, Cherry asked, "Julian said that robot knows a lot about you and even investigated the nanny from back then?" Her eyes looked especially dark and bright in the dim room because of how intently she was staring. It made me uncomfortable, and I instinctively rejected her fake attempt at closeness. What did my past have to do with her? I thought she must have heard the rumors about my childhood and had come on purpose to make me miserable, so my expression cooled. "Don't misunderstand me. I'm really worried about you. That nanny attempted to murder you, and now this robot with an unknown identity shows up out of nowhere. If the two are connected, wouldn't that be dangerous?" Cherry was polished and socially flawless, and the worry on her face was gentle enough to put anyone at ease. At first, what she said sounded reasonable, but if I thought about it carefully, it seemed suspiciously like she was trying to steer me somewhere. Besides, I did not like hearing her speak badly of 1991. My bad temper was already famous throughout the circle anyway, so I simply stopped bothering to be polite and told her to go back where she came from. Cherry's expression nearly cracked. With a forced smile, she said, "We are sisters in a way, after all. I just wanted to remind you not to believe everything that Robot says just because he looks like Julian. Things like that don't have feelings." After saying that, it was as if she could no longer keep up the loving sisters act, and she left in a hurry. I watched her back, utterly confused. "What was that?" I muttered as I turned around, not noticing when 1991 had come out and was standing behind me. He startled me so badly that I jumped. "What are you doing? Are you actually trying to kill me now?" I snapped, glaring at him. 1991 looked at me with a kind of tender indulgence, as if he were watching a spoiled child. "Darling, if that were my intention, you would already be with God by now."
"Fine."
I could not outtalk him. Listless, I told him to leave quickly, but 1991 only laughed softly and took something out of his pants pocket. Cinderella has not turned the tables completely or defeated the villain yet. How could her fairy godmother leave now? It was a photograph. In the dim, rainy light, it looked old and yellowed. A mother and daughter sat inside a cramped, shabby rural shack, both wearing the same gloomy, timid expression. When I saw their faces clearly, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. How could those two be together? Agnes Green and Cherry Young? Two people who appeared to have no connection at all were actually an adoptive mother and her adopted daughter. I stared at the photograph for a long time, unable to come back to myself. Then I asked 1991, "Where did you get this?" 1991 calmly dusted off his collar. "I happened to pass by the psychiatric hospital and stopped in for a visit." Noticing my stare, 1991 raised an eyebrow. "Is that not allowed?"
"No."
It was very much a felony. I shook my head and forced my attention back to the matter at hand. According to 1991's analysis, Cherry had most likely been involved in planning the car crash. Otherwise, Agnes could not have known my exact route and departure time. But why would Cherry do that? She was already the Young family's daughter. What kind of threat could I possibly be to her? 1991 unbuttoned his collar and said, "What if she isn't?" I froze. "You mean Cherry lied to the Youngs?" Back then, Cherry had been found because of the gold christening bracelet on her wrist. Mr. Young Sr. had personally taken it to a little mountain chapel to have it blessed after his daughter was born. There was also a burn scar on the back of Cherry's neck. The moment Mrs. Young Sr. saw it, she burst into tears and became certain that Cherry was her daughter. Later, Cherry had even volunteered for a DNA test, and the results matched. 1991 stood by the window, tilted his head, and smiled. "Use a little Sherlock Holmes logic, darling. When you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth." In the endless rain, 1991's low voice echoed through the quiet room. He stated a piece of common sense we often overlooked. A dead person's hair can still be used for a DNA test. Realization struck me. The real young daughter might have already died, so Agnes had used her own daughter to replace her. And when I was little, Agnes had often shown me her true nature. The things she had done to me, she very likely had done to the Young's real daughter too. My mind uncontrollably filled with images that made me shudder. The collar, the dog bowl, and the nursery rhyme she used to hum by my ear before I understood what it meant. Little bird, no feet, nowhere to run. My face turned pale. I swallowed, and the fingers hanging beside my leg trembled slightly. But then 1991's sudden movement somehow stopped my thoughts from sinking any deeper into that mire. "What are you doing?" I looked up at him in surprise. His long, pale fingers rested at the edge of his belt. Hearing my question, he lifted one elegant eyebrow and explained gently, "Wet clothes need changing. That is common sense too, baby." I was yanked back to reality at once and felt completely speechless. "Don't strip in front of me, handsome." 1991 shamelessly accepted the flirtatious address and even laughed in a teasing voice. "Don't be mad. I only wanted to get your attention." My face burned red. For a long moment, my brain completely stalled, and I could not think of anything to throw back at him. Just as I was stewing in embarrassment, The door lock suddenly turned, and Julian's puzzled voice sounded outside. "Why is the door locked? Mia, what are you doing in there?" I sighed irritably.
Here we go again.
1991 had already picked up his discarded clothes and slipped into the closet with practiced ease, as if hiding during an affair were a skill he had mastered. After I finally managed to brush Julian off in the hallway and return to the room, the balcony door was wide open. The wind and rain had softened, stirring the curtains in a faint sway. My heart tightened. I turned my wheelchair and rushed to the closet. 1991 was gone. An indescribable sense of loss settled over me. I leaned my head heavily against the closet door, my eyes blank. Just as I sat there in confusion, I suddenly caught sight of two elegant lines carved into the inside panel of the closet. "Let me give you the grand revenge you deserve, my little owner. Then we will walk openly in the sun together." My fingers slowly traced over those words. In that moment, I felt as if I had already been saved. Without walking, without needing legs, I had somehow reached the other side. The summer downpour ended quietly, but another storm crashed through the city. On the busiest Monday morning, the network across downtown Seattle suddenly went down for half an hour. Young Holdings and Julian's company were hit especially hard. Every office computer and conference room screen looped one horrifying piece of evidence after another about the murder plot. News sites, forums, and even employees' personal social media accounts were flooded with frantic discussions. According to the detailed evidence, Agnes was not merely a mentally unstable woman who had attempted murder. She had also committed child abduction and trafficking, aggravated assault, and countless acts of horrifying abuse against the Young family's biological daughter. This time, it was the Young family's turn to lose their minds. It happened to be the day of a family dinner. Every relative present watched Mrs. Young Sr.'s face go from deathly pale to red, and even someone as composed as Mr. Young Sr. nearly fainted. In the corner, Cherry suddenly lost all the poise her privileged status had given her. Her eyes went glassy as she stared fixedly at the television screen. Mrs. Young Sr. was in agony. Her biological daughter had been abducted by Agnes and abused until she became ill and died, yet she herself had treated the enemy's daughter like the apple of her eye. She rushed at Cherry, swung at her viciously, grabbed her hair, and demanded, "You knew everything. For more than 20 years, you and your mother lied to us. Where is my real daughter? My Cherry? Give her back to me. Give her back." Cherry was beaten until blood ran from the corner of her mouth. Her body swayed with the force, yet she remained eerily calm and gave a soft laugh. "But I am Cherry, Mom. Your Cherry. Your baby girl. Haven't you always given me whatever I wanted?" Mrs. Young Sr. could not believe that the person in front of her could still be this calm. Cherry looked like some heartless monster. Mrs. Young Sr. nearly stopped breathing and had to be held up by Mr. Young Sr. and several relatives. Mrs. Young Sr. beat her own chest in pain and cried with bitter regret, "God, what did I do to deserve this?" Cherry's innocent black eyes, which were always lowered in timid submission, now seemed to burn quietly with resentment. That silent fire scorched all the way to me. From across the room, she looked at me with a smile that did not reach her eyes and mouthed, "Your dog did this, didn't he?" My expression was indifferent. I felt only exhausted by the human tragedy unfolding before me. There would always be people in this world who indulged in fantasy and mistook their daydreams for reality, fanatical and blind. They would defend their madness even at the cost of bloodshed, possessed by it until they turned fanatical and extreme. Julian finally seemed to come back from his shock. He looked at me with a complicated expression for a long time, then silently stepped in front of me and blocked Cherry's gaze. Soon, the police arrived and took Cherry away as a suspected accomplice. As she brushed past me, she glanced at my right leg, tugged at the corner of her lips, and murmured ambiguously, "I should never have shown mercy." Back then, Agnes had wanted me dead. Perhaps Cherry had remembered that I had once helped her. But could that really be called mercy? Whoever sheds human blood, by human hands shall their blood be shed. It was just like my name, Mia Kane. I still chose to believe what 1991 had said. The trial that had shaken all of Seattle came to an end in late summer. Cherry went to prison. The ashes of the Young's real daughter, buried deep beneath the earth in a remote mountain town for more than 10 years, were finally brought home. Mr. Young Sr. and Mrs. Young Sr. cried until they nearly collapsed. Julian had received a great deal of help from the Young family over the years, so he was dragged into the chaos too, and ended up overwhelmed. As for 1991, the one who had controlled everything from behind the scenes, he remained perfectly calm, whistling as he took advantage of Julian's absence and stole me out of Julian's mansion. After everything that had happened, I almost felt as if I had truly stepped into a fairy tale. Smiling, I asked him, "Are you really my fairy godmother?" With a click, 1991 fastened my seatbelt for me, his lips curving as he asked, "Are you finally ready to get to know me?" A wash of blue light fell across the bridge of his straight nose, catching at a small angle before its clear shimmer drifted through his deep eyes. "Yes." I smiled faintly and said with certainty, "I want to get to know you." 1991. With effortless flair, 1991 spun the steering wheel with one hand and drove me toward the airport. "Then don't start crying on me, okay?" The plane crossed oceans and mountains before arriving at Garnet Peak on the other side of the world. The place was covered in snow year-round. Towering peaks rose like giants among the surrounding mountains. Sitting in my wheelchair, I looked up and felt as if the peaks stretched beyond sight, the endless white snow like a curtain drawn across the sky. 1991 bent down, rested his chin on my hat, and held my hand. Then he lifted it and pointed toward the tallest peak. His voice was very soft when he said, "Mia, your parents are there." My heart gave a violent jolt, and I looked toward it as if struck by lightning. If silence could take the shape of a mountain, it would have been that lifeless, soundless peak. 1991 told me that my biological parents had been scientists and explorers. "After your mother became pregnant with you, your father built me." 1991 spoke slowly. "You could say I was created for you." The two of them traveled across more than half the world and put out countless missing person notices. Then, by chance, your mother heard that anyone who climbs Garnet Peak can receive God's blessing. Scientists, for all their rationality, often carry a faith and romanticism unlike anyone else's. So the two of them decided to seek divine guidance for their missing daughter. They brought 1991 with them and stepped onto that lonely peak, a mountain even veteran explorers had always considered extremely dangerous. Unfortunately, God did not favor them. An avalanche buried them in a snow-filled ravine. When their oxygen was running out and no help was coming, they looked at 1991, the only one who might be able to make it out. 1991 did not need oxygen. So, with the last of their strength, they lifted 1991 up and let him climb out over their bodies. When he finally saw the light again, 1991 heard his owner give him one final command in a faint voice. That command was to find you. 1991 gently cupped my tear-streaked face. His features, now stripped of their disguise, were cold and sharp as a blade, beautiful as a god. "So, Mia, you were never an unloved child. I climbed out of that snowy mountain over your parents' bodies and endured endless hardship just to come here and love you." 1991 bent down and kissed me with reverence, then sighed. "Because of you, I learned what heartbreak means." Cold air filled my lungs, but there was a spring-like warmth in 1991's arms. With him beside me, I gathered my courage again and looked toward the mountain where my family was buried. A person could live without legs. Silently, in my heart, I asked them not to worry, because once a person knew they were loved, they found the courage to love again. So basically, this whole story teaches us one very important life lesson. Never trust your husband, your nanny, your childhood memories, your ex, your replacement husband robot, or honestly anyone with access to your emotional damage folder. Because in this universe, everybody is either lying, secretly related, secretly evil, or secretly a billionaire-level mastermind with a PhD in emotional destruction. And the only safe person? A morally questionable robot named 1991 who shows up like, "Good news. Thanks, I solved your trauma and also committed 3 felonies for you. Want cake? Also important takeaway. If your love life ever requires a panic button, bodyguards, and Ascension emotional support android, maybe just maybe you are not in a relationship. You are in a Netflix limited series with budget issues. And finally, real moral. Healing is great, revenge is messy, love is complicated, but the real MVP is still the guy who brings you raspberry cake during a rainstorm while also casually rewriting your entire family history like it's a Wikipedia edit.
So yeah.
Trust issues? Upgraded. Trauma? Expanded DLC. Boyfriend? Error 404, replaced by emotionally unstable AI with main character energy. Subscribe for more stories where love is optional but chaos is fully optimized.